When in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands that have connected them with another, and assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind demands that they declare the causes that impel them to the separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, and that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. And when any government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it and institute new government, laying its foundations upon such principles and organizing its powers in such a form as to them seems best to effect their safety and happiness. Prudence indeed would dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes, and all experience has shown that mankind is more disposed to suffer, while evils are sufferable, than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they have become accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and appoint new guardians for their future security. Such has been the patient sufferance of these colonies. And such is now the circumstances which compel them to alter their former systems of government. The history of the present King of Great Britain, George III, is a history of repeated abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, the establishment of a direct tyranny over these states. To prove this, let facts be submitted before a candid world. He has refused his assent to laws, the most wholesome and necessary for the public good. He has forbidden his governors to pass laws of immediate and pressing importance unless suspended in their operation till his assent should be obtained, and when so suspended, he has utterly neglected to attend to them. He has refused to pass other laws for the accommodation of large districts of people unless those people would relinquish their right to representation in the legislature, a right inestimable to them and formidable to tyrants only. He has called together legislative bodies at places unusual, uncomfortable, and distant from the depository of their public records for the sole purpose of fatiguing them into compliance with his wishes. He has dissolved representative houses repeatedly for opposing with manly firmness his invasions upon the rights of the people. He has refused for a long time after such dissolutions to cause others to be elected, whereby the legislative powers, incapable of annihilation, have returned to the people at large for their exercise, and the state remaining in the meantime exposed to all the dangers from invasion without and convulsions within. He has endeavored to prevent the population of these states, for that purpose obstructing the laws of naturalization of foreigners, refusing to pass others to encourage their migrations hither, and raising the conditions for the appropriation of new lands. He has obstructed the administration of justice by refusing his assent to laws for establishing judiciary powers. He has made judges dependent on his will alone for the tenure of their offices and for the amount and payment of their salaries. He has erected a multitude of new offices and sent hither swarms of officers to harass our people and eat out their substance. He has kept among us, in times of peace, standing armies without the consent of our legislatures. He has affected to render the military independent of and superior to the civil power. He has combined with others to subject us to a jurisdiction foreign to our Constitution and unacknowledged by our laws, giving his assent to their pretended acts of legislation, for quartering large bodies of armed troops among us, for protecting them by mock trial, from punishment for any murders which they commit on the inhabitants of these colonies, for cutting off our trade with all parts of the world, for imposing taxes upon us without our consent, for depriving us in many cases of trial by jury, for transporting us beyond the seas to be tried for pretended offenses, for abolishing the free system of English laws in a neighboring province, establishing there an arbitrary government, and enlarging its boundaries so as to render it at once an example and a fit instrument for establishing the same absolute rule into these states, for taking away our charters, for abolishing our most valuable laws, for altering fundamentally the forms of our governments, for suspending our own legislatures and declaring themselves invested with the power to legislate for us in any case whatsoever. He has abdicated government here by declaring us out of his protection and waging war on us. He has plundered our seas, ravaged our coasts, burnt our towns, and utterly destroyed the lives of our people. He is at this time transporting large armies of foreign mercenaries to these shores to complete the works of death, desolation, and tyranny, already begun with circumstances of cruelty and perfidy by him, scarcely paralleled in the most barbarous of ages, and totally unworthy the head of a civilized nation. He has constrained our fellow citizens taken captive on the high seas to bear arms against their countrymen, to become executioners of their friends and brethren, or to fall themselves by their hands. He has excited domestic insurrections among us, and has endeavored to bring upon the inhabitants of our frontiers the merciless Indian savages, whose known rule of warfare is the undistinguished destruction of all sexes, ages, and conditions. In every stage of these oppressions, we have petitioned for redress in the most humble of terms. Our repeated petitions have been answered only by repeated injury. A prince whose character is thus marked by every act that may define a tyrant is unfit to be the ruler of a free people. Nor have we been wanting in our attentions to our British brethren. We have warned them from time to time of the attempts by their legislature to extend an unwarrantable jurisdiction over us. We have reminded them of the circumstances of our emigration hither and our settlement here. We've appealed to their native justice and magnanimity. And we have conjured them by ties of common kindred to disavow these usurpations, which would inevitably interrupt our connections and correspondence. They too have been deaf to the voice of reason and consanguinity. And therefore we must acquiesce in the necessity, in the circumstances which denounce our separation, to hold them, as we hold all mankind, enemies in war, in peace friends. We therefore, the representatives of the United States of America, in General Congress assembled, appealing to the Supreme Judge of the world for the rectitude of our intentions, do in the name and the authority of the good people of these colonies solemnly publish and declare that these united colonies are of right and ought to be free and independent states, and that they are absolved from any allegiance to the British Crown, and that any connection between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved, and that as free independent states, they have the right to declare war, conclude peace, contract alliances, establish commerce, and do all other acts and things free and independent states may of right do. And for the support of this declaration, with firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor.